Nearly everyone I know has his or her own anecdote about the origin of a word. We are at all, in that sense, amateur philologists, or corollary to that word, etymologists. But that's a confusing word because that sounds too much like entomologist, which means a person who examines bugs. Nevertheless, we have our favorite stories about the origin of words, and these are mine. 19th century British women of the upper classes placed enormous value on white skins. Oh, you could use a little rouge and so forth, that was right. But the arms, the neck, the face, the shoulders should be white. It was considered very beautiful. So naturally they shied away from being in the sun. When their husbands, either British civil servants or military officers, were posted to India, or as the British call it, the Raj, out at the Raj, usually they were posted for 5 to 7 years. They would pack up their steamer trunks and get on the P&O line, which is Pacific Orient, the line that brought all the British out to India. And they generally look forward to it, especially the single officers, the single men look forward to it. Remember that line from Kipling's On the Road to Mandalay, where he says, "Send me somewhere east to Suez, where the best is like the worst, and there ain't no 10 commandments, and a man can raise a thirst." Yeah, they liked it. Getting back to the women, they didn't mind going out to India, but they just didn't want to be in the sun. So the first point of debarkation from the Thames was Cape Town in South Africa. Therefore, they were sailing down south on the Atlantic, and since they were upper class, they got special treatment. And since they carefully avoided the rays of the sun, they wished to be cabined on the port side going out and the starboard side coming home. That way, they would not be exposed to the afternoon sun. So the ship's steward would stamp on their luggage, port out, starboard home, or its acronym, POSH. So we get our word, P-O-S-H, posh, as an adjective for better quarters. Some words take on a meaning which is opposite of what they were originally intended. In the Middle Ages in England, there was a lace fair and a sale of lace scarves every year in the city of Ely. It was always held on the feast of St. Audrey, which is October the 17th. At first, the dealer sold only the finest quality lace available, but as the years went by, every second-rate or third-rate bit of cloth would wind up at Ely on St. Audrey's Day. Eventually, bad cloth, bad quality, was considered, oh, that's St. Audrey's, or the shortening of that, tawdry. Means cheap. Another such word with a perverse meaning arose from the last days of the crumbling Roman Empire. In the 5th century, many common people, well-to-do people, believed that the empire was crashing because of the slothfulness and sinfulness of their own nobility. The nobility was so disdained by the middle class and people sometimes of wealth that they didn't want any part of them. So they would eventually start to sign their names. They'd sign their name and go into a meeting or a party or registration. Then they were right after it, sine, which means without in Latin, sine nobilitas, which means without nobility. That eventually was abbreviated to the word snob. Another common noun, which we inherit from the Romans, contains kind of a pejorative view by men in regards to women's conversation. When they would go to the town for shopping on Saturday morning, the husband and wife would leave by the same large road, and the word for road in Latin is via. They would go to the large road to where the roads separated into 3 branches. And there the women would stop and talk to each other, and the men would hang around with the packages, and they considered what the women were talking about as the talk of the 3 roads, or trivia. But the word gossip is different. Gossip, in the Middle Ages, children were baptized and their godparents would meet each year on the anniversary for a party. The grandparents or godparents were called, in those days, god siblings. And young people listening to them talk considered such talk about other people as only done by God's siblings, and therefore we get the word gossip. Gospel, on the other hand, is a different origin. Gospel comes from the Old English word and German word spiel, which means to speak. So when God speaks, it is a God spiel or a gospel. In the arena of games and amusements, it is surprising to me to find out how recent is the game of bridge. It was first called birch, imported from the continent. Really taken up enthusiastically by British in the lush 1880s. Women's were first excluded from it, as they tend to be from poker. But by the turn of the century, women's bridge clubs were much larger and more prolific than men's bridge clubs. And by the way, the word trump comes from the Roman generals who would make a triumphal, evident entrance into the city of Rome. The captors they would have with them bearing the spoils of war. So the bridge word trump comes directly from triumphus, the name for such a victorious entrance. In football, the line of scrimmage comes directly from the military term, a skirmish line. And in years ago in England, in fact today probably, a punt is a bet. So if you punt the ball, you're betting that you can get it off and up in the air. The word gymnastic comes from the Greek word, which means simply naked, because that's how the gymnasts in Greece and the Olympic people preparing for the Olympics practiced. In 18th century Britain, the rakes of the English country's life, that is the offspring of lords, would gather on horseback and pick out a distant church steeple and set it as a goal and make it a race to get there, a steeplechase. In the 19th century, in American horse racing, it was customary for a rider who was maybe 8 or 10 lengths out in front to release his grip on the horse's neck and relax a little bit and let his hands hang down and trot into victory. Ever after, winning by a big margin is called winning hands down. Some proper names have become part of our language. Most everyone knows the story of Captain Charles Boycott, the land agent for the estates of wealthy British landowner in County Mayo. This is in the 1880s. He raised the rent of the tenants. The Irish farmers were already impoverished, and the tenants turned on him under the sponsorship of the Irish Land League. Local shops wouldn't sell him anything. They wouldn't harvest his crops. They blocked his mail. They wouldn't speak to him. Eventually, Captain Boycott left Ireland for good, but he left us a word in the vocabulary, boycott. By an unfair trick of fate, a man by the name of John Duns Scotus, you may remember John Duns Scotus, he was the scholar, very brilliant man who taught Charlemagne to read and write. He was one of the most brilliant thinkers of the Middle Ages. But when the Renaissance and the revival of learning came, his conservative disciples preached in every pulpit against the new culture. Finally, they were contemptuously called Duns men, or eventually dunces. The Earl of Chesterfield gave his name to an overcoat, a couch, and a cigarette. Lord Raglan was an aide-de-camp to the Duke of Wellington, and finally he married Wellington's daughter, was immortalized by a loose-fitting coat with sleeves extending to the neck, a raglan sweater. On the other hand, the Earl of Cardigan, who led the disastrous charge of the Light Brigade during the Crimean War, set a fashion by wearing a warm jacket of knitted wool, which in turn is named for him. And finally, in the year 1894, one Samuel Benedict, apparently a man about town and a member of New York's Cafe Society, came into the old Waldorf with a terrible hangover. And he he knew exactly what was going to make it better. He said, I want a breakfast of 2 poached eggs, the ham, and the hollandaise sauce. Thereafter, the maitre d' of the Waldorf, that famous Oscar of the Waldorf, christened the whole affair Eggs Benedict in honor of this apparently genial rake. In our flower gardens, we have more things that are named for people. Include wisteria, for the anatomist and professor of surgery at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Caspar Wister, whose name, by the way, is perpetuated in the Wister Institute, still there in Philadelphia. A U.S. congressman during the Civil War would have probably been forgotten had he not been appointed as a minister to Mexico. There, he became attracted to a large flaming flower, which he brought back to the United States. His name was